Great players don't appear out of nowhere. The trajectory was there, in the spin rate, the prospect report, the contract structure, long before the world noticed. We find that trajectory every morning, pull the 3 stories that are actually moving the game, and break down what they mean before the day gets away. This is Streak Plot Baseball. Let's get into it. The New York Yankees are right in the middle of an American League East race with playoff odds pushing close to 90%. And the last thing they needed was to lose their ace. Gerrit Cole is heading to the injured list, and the word coming out of New York is that this involves his UCL, which means Tommy John surgery is a very real possibility. That's not just a bad week. That could be a season-ending, possibly a career-altering situation for one of the best pitchers in baseball. Now, before we talk about what happens next, let's just sit with what this means for a second. Cole has been the anchor of this rotation for years. When he's right, he's one of the 5 best pitchers on the planet. The Yankees built their pitching identity around him. So yes, the bullpen is going to have to absorb some extra work in the short term, and the rotation will shuffle around. That's the mechanical stuff, and it's real, but it's also not the most important thing happening here. The most important thing happening here is a young pitcher named Elmer Rodríguez, and if you haven't heard that name yet, you're about to start hearing it a lot. Rodríguez is 22 years old, and he's been pitching at AAA, that's one level below the big leagues. He is the number 2 prospect in the entire Yankees organization, and the scouts who cover this stuff have been excited about him for a while now. Here's why. His fastball sits between 93 and 97 miles per hour, and the way it comes out of his hand, what scouts call downhill angle, makes it play even harder than the radar gun says. That fastball grades out as potentially elite. The one thing he's still developing is his command, controlling exactly where that pitch goes. And that's normal for a 22-year-old arm who hasn't seen a big league hitter yet. Before Cole's injury, Rodríguez was probably looking at a late summer debut if everything went smoothly. Now, the Yankees need a starter, and they need one now. Their next 7 days include a 3-game series against the Tampa Bay Rays, and then 2 games in Kansas City. Real games that matter in a real playoff race. They can't go into those games shorthanded. So what does this mean for Yankees fans? It means your team is about to answer a question that every contender eventually has to answer. Can your young pitching step up when the moment gets big? Rodríguez has the stuff. The fastball is legitimate. Whether he has the command and the composure to handle a major league lineup in September, or potentially October, is the question that's about to get answered ahead of schedule. The Cole injury is genuinely scary, and Yankees fans have every right to be worried about what a UCL issue means for his long-term future. But there's a prospect in the system who has been waiting for exactly this opening. The next 4 to 6 weeks are going to tell us a lot about whether the Yankees farm system, ranked 13th in baseball, is ready to deliver at the big league level when the team needs it most. Here's your takeaway. Gerrit Cole is hurt, and the UCL concern is serious enough that this might not end with a quick return. Watch for Elmer Rodríguez to get the call. He has the raw stuff to compete in a big league rotation. The question isn't whether he's talented enough, it's whether he's ready right now. The St. Louis Cardinals are in a tricky spot in the National League Central, trying to compete while the number on their payroll tells you they have room to maneuver. And right now, one of the most interesting stories on their roster is one that requires a little bit of reading between the lines. Because what you see in the standings and what the underlying numbers say about Michael McGreevy are 2 very different things. On paper, McGreevy looks like a quietly excellent pitcher. He's been one of the better stories in St. Louis this year. A 2.40 ERA over 10 starts, which is genuinely impressive. That's a number that would make him a middle-of-the-rotation starter for a lot of teams, and Cardinals fans have probably been feeling pretty good about what he's bringing every 5th day. But here's where it gets complicated. There's a metric called xERA. I'll explain it once and then we'll move on. It essentially measures what a pitcher's ERA should be based on the quality of contact being made against him, as opposed to just what the scoreboard says. And McGreevy's xERA is 5.86. That's a gap of nearly 3.5 runs between what the box score shows and what the underlying data says is actually happening. To put that in plain language, hitters have been making really solid contact against McGreevy all season. They've been hitting the ball hard. The hits and runs just haven't fully shown up yet because of timing, luck, and a few factors that tend to even out over the course of a season. Over 56 innings, that's a lot of good contact that hasn't turned into runs. Baseball has a way of correcting that kind of gap. His velocity is also worth noting. He's sitting about 91.5 miles per hour on his fastball, which is a tick and a half below where he was last season. That's not a catastrophic drop, but it's real, and it matters against big league hitters. Now, here's what I want Cardinals fans to understand, because I think this is actually an important nuance. McGreevy has historically been a pitcher who beats his expected numbers, meaning he's consistently outperformed what the data models predict. And that's not nothing. That's a skill. Some pitchers are just better at limiting damage than the raw contact quality would suggest. So some of that gap you'd expect to be there for him. But even accounting for that historical pattern, the current gap is more than 2.5 runs beyond what he typically outperforms by. Something is going to close. The question isn't really whether his ERA is going to rise. The question is by how much and how fast. And what that means for the Cardinals is that they have a window right now, a window where McGreevy looks like an asset on a team that could potentially use him in a trade or lean on him as a foundation piece. That window is going to look different in August than it does today. For Cardinals fans sitting in the stands, this is actually a moment to feel good about something, while being honest about the longer picture. McGreevy has kept the team in games. The quality starts have been real. But the ball is being hit harder than his ERA suggests, and the second half of this season is going to test whether he can sustain any version of what he's been doing. He's making just $800,000, which is essentially a bargain price for a starting pitcher in today's game. That's also worth appreciating because if his ERA normalizes and climbs, the Cardinals can still absorb that. Here's your takeaway. Michael McGreevy's season looks better than it probably is. He's a young pitcher with real ability, but hitters have been making hard contact all year, and the ERA hasn't reflected it yet. Enjoy this version of the story, and expect it to get a little messier before summer's out. The Houston Astros are still a name you take seriously in the American League West, but their playoff odds right now are sitting under 20%, and they're caught between their championship window and the reality of what this roster looks like heading into the summer. And right in the middle of that tension is Lance McCullers Jr., one of the most fascinating and honestly kind of heartbreaking stories in baseball right now. McCullers has been in Houston since 2015. He was part of the World Series run. He has been, at various points in his career, one of the most talented and electric pitchers in the game. A curveball that hitters simply couldn't do anything with. A personality that made him a fan favorite in that city. This is a guy who genuinely matters to Astros fans, and what's happening to him this season matters in a big way. He's in the final year of a $17 million a year contract, which means everything he does between now and the end of October is being watched through two lenses: what it means for this team's playoff chances and what it means for what he earns next. And right now, both pictures are complicated. His ERA this season is 6.86. That is not a good number. For context, that's higher than it was last year, which was already elevated. And his home run rate, the number of home runs he's allowed per 9 innings, has been climbing for several years now. That's the kind of trend that tells you something real is changing, not just a bad stretch of luck. But here's where the story gets genuinely interesting and where I want you to pay attention. His underlying numbers, the metrics that measure what should be happening based on contact quality, are actually much better than that 6.86 ERA suggests. His expected ERA is around 4.4. His FIP, which filters out a lot of the balls in play and focuses on strikeouts, walks, and home runs, is sitting near 4. Those aren't ace numbers, but they're solid mid-rotation pitcher numbers. What that tells you is that McCullers has been genuinely unlucky in some ways this season, that not everything driving that ERA is real. But the home run rate is real. 50% of the balls put in play against him have been hit hard, and he's on pace for significantly fewer innings than his career average, which has always been the defining challenge with this pitcher. Durability, or rather the lack of it, is not a new story with McCullers. It's been the central question of his career. He's 11 years into his big league life. He's dealt with arm injuries, a Tommy John surgery earlier in his career, and now he's working through a season where he needs every single start to go well if he wants to rebuild his market value before the winter. The Astros, for their part, are working with almost no financial flexibility, which means if they're going to keep him, it has to make sense on the numbers. Here's what I think about when I look at this story. McCullers at his best was a special pitcher. He could go deep into games, miss bats with that curveball, and will the Astros through tough moments. That version of him is the player his fans remember, and what his next contract is going to be measured against. But careers don't always end the way the highlight reel suggests they should. And what we're watching right now, this contract year, this ERA, these innings limits, is a pitcher trying to prove he's still that guy while the evidence is genuinely mixed. Your takeaway here is simple. This is a really important summer for Lance McCullers Jr. His ERA is ugly, but some of that is bad luck. The concerning parts are the home run rate and the innings count. Those tell a longer story. Watch how he performs in June and July. If he can get healthy, log consistent starts, and keep the ball in the park, he rebuilds his value. If the ERA and the home run trend both continue, this Houston chapter might be ending on a difficult note. That's the read on the day. The game moves fast, the data moves faster. Come back tomorrow and we'll be ahead of it again. This is Streak Plot Baseball, where greatness is never random.